Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Pharma Insights, the talk show brought to you by Platforce, where we explore the intersections of technology, strategy, and innovation in the pharmaceutical industry. My name is Juliana Kreisel, and I'll be one of your moderators. We are diving into the critical aspects of the industry that impacts in everything, from development to delivery, customer experience, or CX. We are going to unpack the secrets of CX success and discuss how to build a customer-centric culture and navigate the evolving landscape of social media and AI in an omnichannel framework. Together, we will explore how these strategies not only meet the needs of today's savings customer, but also how they are shaping the future of the industry. I would love to introduce my colleague Stefan Repin, head of marketing here at Platforce. You know that I don't like to do this by myself. Hi, Steph. How are you doing?
Hey, Stefan has been following the Olympic Games, and since we love the Olympic Games, that's why we actually named the webinar the Olympic Games of CX Customer Experience, right?
Yes.
So I'll be, since we have five circles in the Olympic Games, we're going to have five people today. We read exactly to match the spirit of the Olympic Games. Hope everyone is watching and everyone is, you know, being happy and fanning their teams. Let's see our next three people who will be on this panel, speakers who represent Romania, US, and well, I guess Mehrnaz is US,
Yes.
maybe UK, Iran, basically. So three teams for Mehrnaz. All right, let's go.
Yes. We would love to introduce our panels, as Stefan said. First, we would love to get Mehrnaz on the stage. She's I will say, old speaker from Pharma Insights. How are you doing, Mehrnaz?
Hi, I'm doing great, and thank you for inviting me to join you two. What a lovely topic to pick on, Olympics to focus on and draw parallels. Yeah, it's amazing. I've been watching it here, and yes, I think Michelle probably represents US and Switzerland, so she's might be supporting two teams there.
Everyone is multi teams, I will say.
Let's ask her. Actually, let's ask her.
Let's
Let's
ask
Yeah,
her.
present.
So
definitely.
let's introduce Michelle. Michelle, who are you running for in this Olympics?
Well, I have a lot of interests. I'm so proud of the Ukrainian high jumper who's breaking world records, and she's a complete inspiration what she's doing. Of course, I'm super excited about the U.S. and what all they're doing. And I still have lived in the UK and Ireland, so I always have a heart for the athletes from those countries as well.
There
And
you go.
Switzerland's not so present per se in the Olympics in the summer. I'm definitely rooting for them in the winter, though.
There you
But
go.
thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this panel. Really honored to be here.
Thank you, Michelle. And then last but not least, we have Alex. Please tell us, what is your team here in the Olympics?
Hi everyone, I'm Alex. I'm from Digitalya. I'm based in Romania. So basically, I am supporting the Romanian teams, teams in there because there are multiple sports. What I'm most proud of, it's probably the person that is inspired Romania right now. It's David Popovic, who is won the gold medal on the swimming part, and I recently just saw an interview with him and his dad, and I also really like the fact how they are approaching the how they approached this part of learning how to swim and participating to the Olympics, not putting pressure on this, seeing it more as a passion.
Mm.
So yeah, hope this will also be inspiring for the people that are watching the Olympics games. Yeah.
You know, one of
Thank
the things I find this time in Olympics is so apparent is the human element, talking about mental health issues that affected Simone Biles and how she's like overcome her demons and coming back with a vengeance, but also seeing athletes who are top of their sports and they go on like to do an activity and they fall over something they practice for 4 years, and it just shows that we shouldn't be seeking perfection. It's normal to fall over, but it's just what you do when you fall over. And I think sometimes in work in pharma, we seeking perfection, but perfection only happens when you fall so many times and figure out how to get up. and it's not stopping your
It
track.
makes me think actually of the athlete from the U.S., the gymnast, who literally biffed it, like really just was doing the bars and fell off in practice, and it was like, really something that could really shake your confidence. And I was so impressed. Like, she got back, had a fantastic performance, and just showed that you can kind of really soldier through that. And I agree with you. I think perfection really is poisonous. It's something that you can't always do it, but you have to have the moments where you can be really sharp, and you really have to bring that gold home, or whatever that medal is you're shooting for.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I thank you all for being here. I hope everyone at home, attendees, you're rooting for your teams in the Olympics, and you can also join us here and bring more of the worldwide connections that we're building in this panel. And to please, everyone, if you have any questions, comments, or anything like that for our speakers, please write it in the comment section. And we have our colleague, Malin Durso, and she will be moderating the chat and the comment section so we can bring it to the panel. So I would guess, without any further delay, I will give a torch to Stefan to start with this incredible session.
So since our sessions are so special, I would say they're special because we let our viewers shoot at us in the same pose that the Turkish shooter is doing it. Maybe you guys have seen the GIF. We let them shoot us not with real bullets, but with questions, and we love questions here at Pharma Insights. So, dear viewers, please don't hesitate to give us questions, because that is our bread and butter. Cool. So I'll start with an interesting intro. So considering that we have customer experience, right? And to start with, I would start with something very, very basic. And my question would be basically to all of us. What is customer experience? Like, what is customer experience? Maybe what is customer success in pharma? And I've just been enlightened by our speakers that you don't really have any KPIs when it comes to customer success. And I was flabbergasted, actually. But let's start at least with the basics. What is, guys, the customer success for you? What's customer experience for pharma, and what stakeholders are involved in customer experience? In considering your attitude, your opinion on this topic. I'll give to the microphone to anyone who's won the most gold medals so far.
Who would that be? Would that be US? I think it's China. We don't have anybody representing China. I can kickstart. I don't think it's not that we don't want to measure customer success, but I just think it's not the habit in pharma. Things are measured are financial metrics, sales targets, market share. And I think customer experience or customer success is measured by monetary return for the pharmaceutical companies. So it has not become a habit or embedded. And I think what we were saying earlier on, we were chatting with Michelle, is it's not something is measured, it's not like defined KPIs. But if you look at other sectors, like I've been on a course with other entrepreneurs who work in direct to consumer, everything they do is measuring and collecting data on customers, and their campaigns, their marketing automations and CRMs are all integrated. So they look at the areas that they can delight and satisfy customers, so they invest more in it. But we don't have that levels. Like if you look at the Olympics, where we're just like watching the Olympics and thinking what could be done in other sectors, but we haven't quite achieved it in pharma. It's not to say the desire isn't there, the desire is there, but it's just we haven't quite figured out that formula because we don't have the data analytics integrated with our campaigns and CRMs. And also, who's the customer? Do we define HCPs as a customer, or do we define the patient as a customer? And I think that's quite ambiguous. We talk about it, but we've not clearly defined who is it we're trying to delight and deliver to.
Yeah, I think I can add to that. I think because from a lot of the teams that I manage, I really see that in medical affairs particularly, and in the scientific communication space and MedInfo, and MSLs too, we're a lot of channels actually, right? And we often are kind of not really coordinated at all with the commercial side, which I know, Mehrnaz, you've worked a lot in that space, and Alex as well. And so for our teams, I think we do more from a, really text perspective. It's saying, what have we talked about with our customers? Were they able to reach us? For us, because we were always used to maybe not being at the forefront, like a sales rep per se, it was part of showing our value in the business. It was part of really saying, how are we actually going to get our scientific information in the right hands, right? And I look at some of the functions that we oversee, like MedInfo, we're really directly customer facing. So if a patient or the caregiver calls us, they basically are saying, I don't know how to use this medicine correctly, or this device is not working. If that patient can correctly articulate how to use it at the end of that call, that should be considered success, right? But do we report that? No. We just give a statistic. We had X amount of consumers. And I think on the other side, and I talked about this when we were kind of getting ready to come out here, is I view what we do often helping to basically keep patients safe with medications, but to make sure that the physicians are comfortable and are able to use our products correctly and to prescribe them particularly correctly. And again, for me, success, the clear feedback would be, they tell us, thank you for that information. That helped me make a good decision. And I've had that scenario where we see that in some of my functions or, through email, things like this. But are we measuring that like collectively? Probably not consistently. But to me, that's success. Like there's no other numbers you can put behind that beats I saved the patient's life because they used the drug correctly, or I was able to get access to a drug which saved, this patient's life. So for me, that's how I always view the success that we have. But to that point, how do you quantify that? That's always the part that gets a bit sticky.
Yeah, I think for me, the measure of success that what we measure at Cheemia is around, are we being seen as a trusted advisor? And my mission is to inspire pharma marketing, medical colleagues, executives to stop dumping marketing messages on HCPs and become their trusted advisors. And to be trusted advisors means that you need to be quite holistic and open, that maybe your product is not always the best solution, but you want to give HCPs correct information and choice so they can make the best informed decision for the patients. And I think it's a mindset shift, because instead of thinking about the product, you need to think about the problem and the people who are having that problem and how you can support them to overcome that problem. And I think once you have that mind shift, your behavior is different. And I think for me, that's the nirvana for us as an industry to be seen as a trusted advisor, not just people who are selling medicine.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Maybe in my opinion, I'm bringing maybe a bit a different perspective on the customer experience. So I see that Richard here asked us to define the customer. So I believe it's important, and thank you, Richard, for this. It's really important to understand who are our customers. And in pharma, probably most of the people are focusing on ACPs, on the doctors that are prescribing the medicines, especially the RX companies, because they are the direct customers. And the beneficiaries are actually the patients. So they're not, I wouldn't, it sounds harsh, but I wouldn't consider the patients as direct customers. I would consider them more beneficiaries in that part. Then in case of the OTC products, the patients are becoming the direct customers, in my opinion, and the pharmacists, the doctors are just a liaison in that part. And in case of the OTC, for example, if I go to a pharmacy and I want flu medicine, basically I don't need a prescription for that. So I will just choose whatever the pharmacy has or whatever I heard from my mama that that works best in there. Then, depending on this, I believe there should be different strategies in terms of how to define a better customer experience, or to have maybe best is a bit too pushy, but something that is better in there. Probably best, you will never achieve that. So in my opinion, like these strategies, you should always start with the outcome, and after that with the technology that you want to implement in there, like in that part. And on the outcome, there also in my opinion, two possible outcomes. The ones that you can measure, for example, NPS, revenue, how many times a sales rep visited a doctor, how many times a doctor opened an email after the sales rep visited, or how many times a doctor registered to a webinar or to an event after a sales rep presented to the doctor. So that's also a good metric to measure the customer success. But there is also the undefined part of it, like how do you make the the doctor to feel, like you make to feel trust in you, you make them feel safe to share what they want, the struggles are, or you make them feel happy that they see you. So this is a bit hard to measure this part of it. So I would say I would define the customer success in there, and also the KPIs. Probably there are KPIs that you can measure, but there is also KPIs that are a bit hard to measure, in my opinion.
The qualitative rather than quantitative. I find we are directly, contacting HCPs, and for me, there's a shift when you're doing push marketing, you contacting them to share information, to when they actually reach out to you and want to ask you information, or they want to co-create. Like, just to give you a simple example, yesterday I was presenting to a group of specialists, and the lead surgeon said to me, I like to present what you presented to us at a grand round to the rest of the people in our hospital and the wider community, because I want to change the pattern of prescribing to adopt the product that you're recommending. For me, that's a huge kind of vote of confidence, because he's becoming an advocate, but also he's taking on his toll to go and share that clinical information with others. That doesn't necessarily mean I get more sales now, but it shows that shifting and turning a customer from not knowing and not being aware of the product to become an advocate, for me, that's a major key measure that they are on the same page as you. And if they take an active approach to go and cascade and communicate that has more credit and more impact than us doing it directly, because it's coming from a credible source. So I think there's a lot of qualitative measures that we could have in terms of advocacy development, and also shift towards co-creating content with customers rather than just developing contents and sending it to them to see how they react to it. Have them as part of that journey of developing it.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, you can go, please.
No, I think it's a great point. Both the points made so far, and I think on the other side of this, I think the problem is there are a lot of KPIs out there, and I know this question obviously was posted earlier, but what I see is that there's a lack of coordination of it, and I think that when we sit down and we say let's make a blended dashboard and say like get a 360 of the customer, it never ends up being all the right people, in my opinion, my humble opinion, at the table. And so you have the sales guys who are like, oh, we're doing great. Here's what we did. Marketing guys are like, we had this many clicks, this many click-throughs, and it's it's very easy and they're used to that. And then I think some of the medical and even market access guys, we have different numbers, right? Like we have kind of different space, and a lot of our data it cannot be tied to money. It cannot be tied to profit. So it sometimes is viewed as a softer view. But I'll give you an example. When I was asking for more resource, for example, from a business unit for a MedInfo medical affairs team, I was showing them how many interactions we had. And it goes back to Mehrnaz's point. The business unit head was a very smart person, not just because they gave me the money, but because they really looked at it and said, okay, these people come to you proactively. Yes. They're coming through these multiple channels, making the effort. Yes. You have NPS scores, you had other things. You could show that this was like, you were meeting the needs of this group, and the cost that you're operating at is extremely efficient. And then she did even more calculations and went, and you have 10 times more interactions than any sales rep I have in the field. And that's not something you normally see, but it's something that, I think we need to also have a bit of a paradigm shift on how we look at that. And us in medical, and I do put some of this on us, we need to be better at articulating what we're doing, and be more concrete about the KPIs. I think the clearest I've been able to communicate finally, definitely in the med affairs space, has certainly been when we're looking at new AI techniques that we're using to actually listen to phone calls. And we're using that to set KPIs to say, how are our call centers doing? How are they improving? How's the customer's experience improving? What are we learning so we can pivot to their needs quicker? These are the kind of things, like, if you're going to use technology too, it's important. But the reason I mention this is because, again, when we start looking at this data, then it's a little more concrete. And I think we have to be better at saying, here's what we're invested in, what we're doing, here's the outcome. And the KPIs, again, I think they should be much more blended across the business to really say, are we doing what we need to, what we've set out to do as a company, both commercially, medically, and from a market access perspective.
I think that's a really good example. When you have somebody smart looking at the data, they can draw insight from it. But the danger is people take that and make it universal, saying activity is going to drive performance, as that's not true. If you're just generating activity for the sake of generating activity, that's just noise. And I find if you're not going out and engaging with customers, nothing's going to happen. Things only happen when you engage with them. But you need to be quite smart and strategic in engaging people who you potentially can solve a problem for. And when they see you as somebody who's helping them with a problem, then you get this two-way communication, push-pull. They're reaching out to you, and then you see results in terms of sales performance. But just to take that point of activity drives customer experience, I think is a false belief. It has to be quality activity targeted to lead to that. And I think Michelle's example is great. Customers don't care what our job title is. You could be medical, you could be sales, you could be marketing. They're just looking for somebody who delivers value to them, that solves their problems, and do it at the time that they need it, and is flexible to use the channel they prefer to use, rather than we sticking to our own preferences. I mean, some commercial leaders in US don't value remote engagement because traditionally it's been face-to-face. They think you should continue face-to-face, but all the evidence shows HCPs prefer a blend of face-to-face and remote because they benefited from speed and agility these channels offer. I mean, look at us, 5 of us, we're living in 5 different countries. We're connected on the same time, in different time zones to talk to each other. This wouldn't be possible without technology. And HCP is doing this more and more. But I think pharma is still quite traditional in accepting that we should be more flexible. Like some companies giving more value to a face-to-face call than a remote video call. To me, that's bizarre. It just doesn't make any sense at all, because evidence shows more data is shared when you're actually meeting with somebody on a video call than you meet them face-to-face. So there's no evidence to support some of the beliefs. So we need to maybe challenge that.
Well, not only that, there was a publication that kind of reissued its findings. I think it was the beginning of this year, end of last year. It said that from an NPS perspective, from a satisfaction, the HCP felt the face-to-face, especially with medical affairs, I can say for certainty, the face-to-face and the virtual, they had in high esteem. There was a preference still for the face-to-face, but again, it depends on the country as well, right? Because we don't have the same access, and that's the problem we have, right? We set our strategies up a lot of times to be very, kind of homogenous, and you send it out and everyone's supposed to follow this plan. But this is where, again, and I always say, if you're going to get the customer experience right, you have to let the countries do what they also need to do, because they know their customers, they know their people, they know their customs. I mean, one of the hardest lessons I had to learn from a customer experience was we launched all these channels and all this technology to look at the Italian and Spanish market that were virtual, basically. And everyone's like, we spent all this money. Why is no one engaging? And my Italian sales rep, I was at a Congress with them. I'm like, why do you think they don't contact us? And they're like, this is not how Italians work. This is not how we communicate. This is not our preference. It's changing, it's evolving. But at the time, it was a good lesson learned to say, even though we think we're putting out a good customer experience, we're not even hitting the customer. That should already be a sign of, honestly, failure.
Yeah. I think understanding people and preferences is so key. That's why Salesforce can be, or frontline medical people can be really effective, because you need to tailor and personalize it based on the person you're talking to understand. But I mean, from a practical point of view, I've been in sales for like 3 decades. if I'm sharing content with you face to face, if I put the content in front of you, I need to be skilled in reading upside down and be able to point in the right thing. But if I'm sharing it on the screen, it's right in front of you. So it has much bigger visibility of content and data. And then according to Viva Pulse report, sales representatives across Europe are sharing more content when they're seeing somebody on a video call. And that leads to 2.5 times more treatment starts. You know, you always say, tell me something I'll forget, show me something I remember, get me involved, and I'll probably change my behavior. So the more we can show them and get them involved, the more likely we are to change behaviors.
Yep. Speaking about behaviors, and I see there is also a question about the KPIs that have innovative metrics and KPIs that have emerged recently. I would say this needs to also be tied with the strategy behind it. Because, for example, NPS, it's a KPI, but what do you do with it? Like, okay, you measure it, but after that, so what? Basically, for example, how we approach things in Digitalya when we are working with our clients, we define, or when we want to approach new markets, we define like experiments where we see, okay, this is the time bandwidth that we will gonna run this experiment. We have this premise, we expect this to happen, and we are measuring like this. For example, okay, we want to approach like a new biotech market where we have to have one client. Okay, we go and approach people and we see how many responses we have and so on. In pharma, I've seen some. It's quite a broad market in there. But let's say, for example, the RX companies in there, the ones that are prescribing medicines. Basically, the best thing that could happen to pharma companies is to not hear complaints or not hear anything from their clients and still have the sales increasing, because this is a good validation that you're providing a good customer experience, and your clients, they can manage everything by themselves and they don't need you to help them with something. As soon as they approach you, this means that they have a problem, and somehow the customer experience have broke. So they need you to interfere in there to solve their problem. And this is also, after that, the way that you are solving the problem, it also creates another customer experience, and the circles, it gets back in together. It's not broken anymore. However, how would I advise in approaching this sort of like just a basic example? You all have electricity in there, but I'm not sure how many of you do you know what company is do you have electricity from, or if you are going proactively to say, hey, you're doing a good job, I'm having light in my evenings in there. So this is also something like people, there are multiple types of people, the ones that they are enjoying the stuff without paying too much attention, so they are neutral to the experiences in there and they are just enjoying the product, the service that you are providing. Then there are the ones that are really value that. For example, I don't know, Apple users, for example, versus Android users. Probably you will be a brand promoter for that. And the ones that are detractors. Again, Apple users versus Android users, they are fans, and the other ones in there. So let's say, for example, in case of the RX companies, you can classify the ACPs. Let's say that these are your customers in prescribers and non-prescribers. You can learn, and then on the prescribers, you can identify which are the promoters in there and which are the persons that are still prescribing, but they are indifferent. They are just prescribing because maybe you have the best reimbursement program on the market or whatever reasons in there. And you can learn you just focus on the ones that are prescribing and they are promoters, have interviews with them, learn what makes them to promote that, and have some KPIs around that by learning from the clients. And after that, create a strategy for the detractors to bring them to the promoters and set specific KPIs in there. For example, KOLs, like how many KOLs manage to bring a detractor to a promoter. So that could be also meaningful KPI. But again, what I'm trying to say here, the KPIs only without the strategy behind and understanding the entire picture, I'm not sure it's helpful in this case. Not sure you,
Yeah.
Mehrnaz, share what you are
No,
thinking.
I echo that, but I think there's an even more fundamental question, right? Like, it's a lot of times we get to the so what, why are we going to measure something, right? And to your point, there's a strategic tie back. But before you do that, you have to say, let's take NPS, it's a very simple scoring. If I get a 1, I see a bunch of 1s. We know human behavior. You usually rate something when you're really happy or you're really upset, right? Like, that's kind of what I typically see. Unfortunately, we have all done it. But at the end of the day, you still can learn a lot from that, because it still means like people are not having a good experience. But again, what's the so what? What am I going to do if I see a bunch of 1s or everyone's a 3 or everyone's a 5? That ties back to the strategy to say, how am I going to pivot and have an impact to change things? I think that the other side, like, of this kind of coin somewhat, is really thinking differently. If you look at the customer as a whole, and if you're saying holistically as a company, that customer has a 360 potential access with us, right? Medscape just did a study recently. Why are doctors burning out? Well, guess what? 50% are doing their drug research and their scientific research in their pajama time, right? One of the things that I took this from not only from the study, but from now managing social media in my own health communication platform, that we needed to understand the cycle of people throughout the day to decide what we even release, right? This is very common in social media. And it made me think, like, we're not doing that. Like, we don't look at the 24-hour clock because we don't even coordinate or know when people are accessing our materials. And I think that was one thing that was fortunate between Med Affairs and the various functions. We could do that, and we were able to tie everything into a single CRM, and to be able to then have a customer profile to say, like, there's a 24-hour cycle, and guess what? Most people are on the website at this time. The pharmacists are on just after work and at lunchtime, and you could start looking at that, but also to start making, to say, okay, that's when we need to release some of our content. That's where, looking at how they're clicking through, you really need to also think about, again, it's not just about they clicked your page. It's how far did they go, and why is everybody only getting 1 minute into that video? Like, I had to scrap something because I was like, that's again the so what. Yes, I was measuring click rates, but again, it's about how far are they going and why are they stopping at a certain point. But it's also, I think, a more innovative look at it is to say temporally, they see our sales rep maybe during the daytime, they call MedInfo at this time. They might access the website here. They might actually use an app that you have, whatever it is, whatever you have going. But if they're not coordinated in any way, you don't really know what your customer is doing. And then, again, are you going to offer them what they need? You really don't always know. And I think that's, if we're to say, if you're going to look at this differently, that's one thing that I'd say is the biggest lessons I've learned as being a social media content creator. It's really critical that that's a success factor, in fact.
I think you touched a really important point, because understanding customers give us insight. I'll give you an example. Some of the specialities in the UK, for patients to get a referral to, say, mental health services if they've got autism or neurodiversity, is 2 years. So if the patients needs to wait for 2 years to see the HCPs, you can just imagine their workload. Communicating with HCPs who are like working on projects, they email me late in the evening because they just like so worked out. They just don't have time. And you think we've got a duty of care, not to try to take the airtime to just bombard them with promotional content when they actually are under so much pressure. So we've got to be really, really relevant. Everything we do should address their pain point. And I emphasize that because it's so key. If you're just thinking about, I've got this drug, I have to sell it, you think very narrow. If you think about, I want to deliver a quality service to help this HCPs with their problem, and my product is part of that solution, you think more about what is it that they need. Sometimes the solution is to help them to do service redesign so they can improve the clinic output, so they can see more patients, so the patients don't have to wait for 2 years. Or what do they do to manage the patients while they're waiting for 2 years before they're seen in the clinic? So it means that you have to really get on their page to understand what is it that keeps them awake at night. It's not sustainable. So many of doctors are burnt out and they just can't really cope with their workload. And we've got a duty of care. And the other thing I wanted to pick up from what you said, Alex, is customer experience doesn't mean keeping them happy. Sometimes things go wrong, but it's how we respond that matters. I mean, there's been shortage of medicine because of Brexit, because of COVID. And we find sometimes customers contact us, they prescribe something, the patient goes to the pharmacy and the product is not available. How do pharma make sure they've got a digital way of communicating even their the stock levels? One of the clients we work with, they actually put that on their website, so you can every day you can see the stock level of different medication and how we respond to address the stock issues. Or if somebody cannot, sometimes the medicine's there, the stock is available, but they not gone through the pharmacy chain, supply chain. It's just communicating and addressing their issues actually builds more trust because they feel you care and you're going out of your way to support them with the issues that they're having. For me, it's not just about demand creation, it's about supporting them through the whole chain, from the point of making them aware to generate the prescription to the point that the patient is satisfied receiving it and experiencing it. So I don't, again, seek perfection here. I think is when things go wrong, how we react is so important. And shows us, about our values as an organization, as an industry.
No, I think, and to piggyback on that, it's a really outstanding point, because it goes back to the earlier point. They don't care who you are. They're talking to you. You represent your company. I represent somebody from Recordati. And so when someone comes, they expect me to have the answer immediately or figure it out. Or if you don't know the answer, you connect somebody with the right person. When people come to me oftentimes with omni-channel, I just laugh because I'm like, it's actually, there's so basic levels of omni-channel where you're connecting. Like, a sales rep shouldn't feel like I can't pass something to my MSL or to the MedInfo team if I need some extra support because I can't handle it. Or like you said, a stock outage. Why is manufacturing not working closely with everybody and putting up these tools? In COVID, this was done really well, actually. Companies like Pfizer, they put IVRS on their phone lines, and they had, different ways to pass through the customer to make sure they got that information in real time. So again, I think this is also, if you're going to say you're omni-channel, this is about the coordination and saying, if you think like the customer, what do they actually want from you? And do we have all those points together, and how do we actually connect them seamlessly? And to me, that's the customer experience side. Omni-channel a lot of times is looked at the logistics, but my view is, what is it the customer is going to experience when they get into that channel experience?
And it's an interesting question here. I think, is it Isaias? Benjamin is asking who's responsible for customer experience and who owns the overall customer. I'm just going to draw an Olympic parallel here. If you're watching the soccer game or you're watching the volleyball, who owns the ball? Is the team passing it on to score? Everybody's really clear. The whole point is score, and you know what you need to do, but you work as a team. So the way I see it within pharmaceutical industry, we are one team. We're not silos. If we're silos, we're going to drop the ball. The only way we can keep the ball up in the air and playing a volley, or, scoring a goal in soccer, is being in tune with each other. If we're not in tune with each other, then we're just playing a single game on our own, and, we're just going to lose. So customer experience is everybody's responsibility. And we need to be always mindful of our peers and colleagues, and knowing whose strength is that they can do things and pass it on to them, to create that overall, success. We can't do it on our own. We can only do it together.
We have another question. Sorry, I'm going to interrupt 2 seconds. We have another question below. Isaias, it says, "Thank you for all the experts Thank you to all the expert speakers for sharing valuable insights. I have one question. How can pharma companies leverage social listening to identify emerging customers' needs and trends and incorporate these insights into their CX strategies?"
Well, that's an interesting question. And funny enough, we have built, like the founders of Digitalya have built their own product in this area. And we also implemented a few use cases for different pharma companies. So it's relatively quite common for us recently to have projects in this space. What we've seen in terms of the projects that we've implemented, there are multiple scenarios. For example, one of them is using social listening to crawl different platforms like Medscape, for example, or LinkedIn or X or whatever forum, different specific forums or medical journals or everything in there. Crawl it for specific terms. Let's say, I don't know, oncology or a specific drug name or whatever in there, and just cluster that into sentiments from the people, like cluster them into topics to understand what they are speaking about, what they are complaining about, and so on. Then those insights are taken over by the content marketing team that are creating specific content into that space, and also from the digital team that maybe they are incorporating in their digital strategy. For example, if you get a lot of topics regarding the fact that you don't have any details about the reimbursement program, or if you have a reimbursement program, just add a specific Q&A on like frequent asked question on the ACP portal or on the brand page for that thing or whatever in that space. So that's one topic. Then another one is identifying, for example, key opinion leaders into this and use them first of all as a promoter for your company, or use their insights in terms of what they are keen to speak about in those conferences that they're at, and just maybe tailor the content also to that point of view. Funny thing here, somebody mentioned to me that they identified at some point a doctor that they was also playing saxophone. So how do you classify that doctor as a key opinion leader on the saxophone, or in terms of the followers, based on his saxophone skills, or based on his number of, like, you don't know why the people are following him, if he shares really insights in terms of medical, or they like their music. There might be situations like this, but for example, these two things I've seen implemented in there. Then also some other stuff in terms of managing complaints, but I can take that with people that are interested in a private chat.
I
I
guess
think.
one question. Sorry, go on.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Mehrnaz.
I was
Please.
going to say, I always think like it goes back to this strategy of what is it you want to achieve and how you're going to do it. I mean, there's always data, it's more and more data, but you have to ask yourself, so what? What is it I'm trying to achieve? And how is that data going to help me to enlighten my path? And once I've got the data, am I going to do something about it? If you're not going to do something about it, there's no point just even gathering the data. And I always think like, think about, we go, grocery shopping, go to a supermarket. We don't stop at every aisle and look at every item. We know what we're going to cook or what we're going to buy. We just go to that point, pick it up, and we know what we're going to do with it. And I think the same applies here. If you're doing social listening, we need to know, why is it we're listening for, and what is it we're going to do with that information? Just being fascinated by sitting and listening is not a good use of our time. So I think it all goes back to overall strategy. What is our overall strategy about customer experience, and how does that tie into everything we do? It needs to be a red thread in everything we do. That's what I'm saying is, we talk about it, but it's not embedded in the core strategy. And sometimes I think less is more. It's hard to orchestrate customer experience when you've got a large organization. It's so much easier to do it in a smaller organization, because you've got a handful of customers and you know them so personally. So you know whether they play a saxophone or not. You know when they're interested in sport or not, because you build a personal relationship. When you try to scale this up, on the large organization, that becomes quite complex and become too analytical. But you need to always maintain that human element of knowing who is it that you're trying to deliver and delight, so you can have that personalized experience for them.
No, I think it's a great point on both. I can't echo any more what you guys said, but I think the biggest thing that I see is we're already buried in data in most of our companies, and we're not even still doing anything with it. I'm sure everyone that's on this call can give examples where you have too much and you're doing nothing. It's almost even paralyzing at some point. And so I think with social listening, you can really open up a can of worms. I had this happen. I did an early project in one of my companies, and we literally had thousands of adverse events we found that no one knew about. And it was at a time when it wasn't even something we thought about in the regulations. So again, that's opening Pandora's box in, I think, the worst possible way. I think the point about knowing what you actually want to achieve, though, with this project, I actually kicked off a social listening project, actually with just simple like Google Analytics tools, Google tools, and we were trying to figure out what was the real patient experience, because we were hearing funny things in some of our channels from the patients with an insomnia drug. And I was like, well, let's listen to some of these different platforms. We picked very specifically drugs.com, like ones that had interaction, but we knew there were medical conversations happening, patients trying to counsel each other, or maybe sometimes HCPs in there. And we were able to kind of more specifically troll those places. And what was interesting is like being able to hear that, we were like really hearing what we needed to hear, because we're like, why is our marketing campaign and our medical campaign not quite hitting? Like, what are we missing? And it was felt like something was missing and we couldn't just quite put our teeth into it. And that exercise alone, because it was so targeted, I think really well thought out strategically, we were able to say, okay, patients are really getting discontinued and switched very badly. And that's something that we can't control, we could have anticipated, but didn't think it would be so bad. It was the patients had expectations that were not what the doctors expected. Patients had conditions or, experience with insomnia we didn't even think about. So those kinds of things, I think if you do this really well, social listening can be a fantastic tool. But other times it can actually inundate you with data that can actually be detrimental, like a bunch of adverse events or product issues, whatever. But other times, if you do it in a very smart way, I think you can get gold from it.
Sorry, I have a question. So we talking about Michelle. I'm subscribed to your Facebook. I always see a lot of education from your page. I actually educate myself about health issues and so on. So guys, feel free to subscribe to Michelle's Facebook page. She's active everywhere, but like especially on Meta, I get to learn a lot. So I think education is a big part of what Pharma can do better to improve the customer experience, right? Because we as clients of pharma companies, eventually when we buy let's say a drug, we do hear the information from the HCPs, but we want to have an alternative way to understand, So as they say, don't challenge my doctor's degree with the Google research, My point being is this. We have a different model where basically pharma companies can advertise to customers more or less directly, which it's called the D2C model, right? And it does work in the US and in New Zealand, as far as I remember. My question would be, is the customer experience different in there? And does the D2C model give a better, I would say, experience for the end customer and for HCPs at that point than the models that we all are used to, let's say in Europe and everywhere else, than the US and New Zealand? The question, I guess, is more for Mehrnaz and Michelle, because they're based in the US, they know the US market more, but Alex, feel free to answer as well.
Yeah, we were having dinner with some friends on Sunday, and one of our friends had a experience of going to hospital and having a couple of surgeries, and we were just actually saying it's so weird in US. You go to the doctor, and patient's voice matters so much that the doctor is actually asking you, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. What do you want to do? And at first, when I moved to US, I'm thinking, you're the doc, you tell me what's your recommendation. Because in UK, they just make a really clear recommendation. This is what you need to be doing, or this is a medication you need to be taking. So in US, it's completely different experience. Patient is king. You put your TV on in between all the Olympics games. There's all these drug adverts, so you can actually go to the doctor and say, I don't want this, I want to be on that medicine. And you can actually choose your provider. It's not like UK that you have to, beg your GP to refer you to a specialist. I can just go directly to a specialist and not even talk to my general practitioners. I can go to the physiotherapy. So if you have insurance, it's important, but then once you've got the funding, the access to medicine, access to services, and I think they're overzealous because they're so worried about being sued. They do everything. You can have an MRI done tomorrow. You would have your, scans done like even before you need it, to ask you to have a colonoscopy every year, whether you need it or not. Sometimes it actually, I think, is a little bit ridiculous because the providers want to make money, so they ask you to do all these procedures. So the patient experience in the US is completely different to what you experience in Europe or UK.
Yeah,
Michelle,
and there's
what's your thought?
externalities. No, and there's externalities to that, right? I just listened to a survey that, or research that was done on this. Like people that are going for body scan MRIs are actually grossly impacting in a very negative way the healthcare system, and they might find out it's a benign nodule, right? And someone's gone through $1,000 procedure, then they went to the doctors. You know, tons of resources tied up in this. So I think the DTC. I'm an American, and even I'm just like, I'm in pharma, obviously, but I just find it can be problematic. And how I mean by this is, you know, I realize now in my social media space, so I have the health communication space, Unbiased Science podcast, and we have a lot of resources that we really think about the literacy of people that are going to actually absorb the information that we're going to actually give them. And we sometimes hit and we sometimes miss. And that's the cool part. We say, okay, a lot of negative questions or a lot more questions and no likes, or lots of likes, people saying, I understand this now. Hey, I took this to my doctor. You know, that's our promotion scores, right? That's how we know we did well. But what I see on the pharma side is these direct to consumer advertisements, they can be great for exposure because oftentimes they run in cycles, right? So you're like, even I'm only there for a week. I already know about some new drug that I didn't even know existed, but I know all about it now. But I'm literate enough to be able to understand it. But on the other side, the flip side, I'll give a real life example. When I worked in drug safety, I worked at a company that made an erectile dysfunction drug. And they had it was a beautiful marketing campaign, aesthetically gorgeous. And it was a husband and a wife sitting in a bathtub and sitting in, you know, just drifting off in bliss to the sunset. And I got a doctor who was like flabbergasted. He's like, I have had 4 women come in today and ask for your drug because of your stupid advertisement. And I laughed at it. It was one of the funniest days of my life. But I said to him, I actually understand. I promise you I'm going to feed this back. And like, you laugh at it and it sounds silly, but you really have to now, like, I'm really much more conscientious of like the literacy levels of people and really being able to absorb all that information so quickly. And they're out seeking, kind of like you touched on, Mehrnaz, a fix for everything, just a tablet instead of exercise or diet or whatever they have to do. They want the tablet to kind of get rid of it. So these, and I'm not saying that that's, you know, not good or bad. It's just how people, you know, we're all human. We've got our behaviors. But that's problematic, right? So, you know, what I find is in my social media space, people will get confused by some stuff that's out there from pharma or the government. And they'll say, hey guys, can you explain this to us in a different way? Or you get someone crazy on TikTok that writes something a bit really silly. And you're like, no, this is not correct. So there's a lot of things like information, and doctors and patients are overwhelmed. So again, the DTC, it's problematic because if you're getting overwhelmed, you're seeing a pharma ad every 10 minutes when you're watching the Super Bowl, you know, you're not going to be super excited about that. So again, I think I understand why it's done. It does have impact, or we wouldn't still be doing it. But again, I think it's got externalities as well.
It has big impact. And I think from a marketing perspective, in terms of addressing the patient's pain point, they are super smart because, you know, you've got a drug for, you know, stroke or hypertension, but the TV ad, first of all, the music starts like about, you know, the guys going out with his family and having a really good time. They're selling the patients the picture they want to see in their life, and they're representing the medicine is the one that is going to get them there. And even the music changes, like from the pain point to the point of like have a happy family and going out for dinner. I think from a marketing perspective, they are super smart. I just feel putting too much pressure on patients who are not well informed to make decisions that impacts their life. I mean, I'm a healthcare professional by qualification. I prefer to see a doctor in the UK who can give me honest opinion about what diagnosis I have and what treatment I need to have and what investigation I need to have. Because if I talk to a doctor in America, I would have a CT scan and MRI every week, even for a UTI, which is totally inappropriate.
Well, I can talk in the patient perspective. For example, when I was pregnant, there was a lot of reels. Instagram I found out, and the reels are a very bad companion for when you're pregnant because everything is very bad. Everything bad can happen to you. But what I found out, and there's a lot that was coming on my Instagram, was about the saving the cells from the umbilical cord. So I was sure I wanted to do it. Like I told my husband, we are going to do this, and I don't care what your thinks and what are your thoughts and things like that. And he was like, okay, if you want to, we can do it. So my doctor is actually my uncle. So I have a lot of he was great, but I have a lot of confidence with him, and he has with me. So I said I want to do this, and he sat there and he was like, "Why?" And like, give me an explanation, like a scientific reason why you want to do this. And I was like, I didn't really have an answer prepared, but I said, like, I collected all the little bit and pieces that I got from Instagram. And I said that. And he was like, you are watching too much social media. Like,
Brilliant.
you're not giving me an actual reason why you want to do this. Like, I didn't find it. And in your case in particular, you don't really need it. So in my case, as a patient, I can say like I got bombarded. So it's really helpful to have the education that you were talking about, that someone can actually explain what do you need and why do you need it, and not just go there and get everything, like a pill to sleep, a pill to lose weight, a pill for this, or a tablet for this, or whatever. And another way to get it, that's also something that I really appreciate from the customer perspective, I can say.
Yeah.
Because it changes your views, and Google is not your doctor. In one webinar, they told me not to consult Google on every single pain I had, because it would give me like, I don't know, something very awful. But yes,
It always comes down to cancer. I'm kidding.
yeah, I didn't want to say that, but yeah, you're dying.
You're
Exactly. Sometimes I'm having the feeling that Google is created by oncology companies.
But yeah, I really think that the knowledge and the explanation for the customer is really valuable, especially since you are bombarded with all of these things now, influencers or things like that, that they promote things that you may not actually need. And everything is worst case scenario. Like nothing is like nice. Everything is going from bad or worse to let's be happy, or things as Mehrnaz said with the campaign, like
Well,
music.
I think it's the language, like you said too. I mean, even amongst HCPs, you have to have a different approach to communication. Doesn't matter whether you're in, and I don't think we really always consider it. So from marketing all the way to medical, there is definitely a gradation as well, right? A specialist versus a GP, a nurse versus maybe an advanced practice nurse. There's a lot of different, things you consider. And then the patient's a whole other, a consumer, pure consumer is a whole other, kettle of fish. And again, when you're talking about customer experience, which is what we're here to talk about, if we're not thinking about that, it doesn't matter what we measure, it's going to be pointless. It's just without, a ship without a rudder.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Guys, we're 1 minute away to the hour. So I want to ask if you want to leave our attendees with an insight, a comment or something before we finish this event, because we want to really be on time. We talked with Michelle how we love punctuality. So who wants to start? I don't know. Alex, do you want to go first?
Yep, I would say, in my opinion, customer experience, it's a mindset. So it's like, okay, there are a lot of things in there that we all need to focus on, from, I don't know, whatever we want to eat until whatever we want to dress today or things like this. However, in terms of to provide a real customer experience in there, you really need to trust in this, and you really need to be passionate about this, because if you don't share these two things, probably you are better if you focus on a different part of it. So my advice would be just to cultivate the passion for the customer experience.
Thank you for that, Mehrnaz. Michelle?
I'll go because I'll let the best go last. Mehrnaz is a rock star. I love her. No, I think my point is really like, and I kind of am trying to champion this in many of my roles now, is I think that we need to know why we're doing what we do. We have to have, I think, it was a great point by Alex, the strategy behind our communication strategy, our customer experience. We have to know why we're doing it. We have to really be focused in some ways and also collaborative in ways, and say, what is truly the customer experience? It's whatever they need from our company when they need it. And so I think that's, for me, always the biggest pitfall, the biggest gap that I have experienced. And I'm still very optimistic that we can really bridge that gap, and I'm always working towards it. But I think if we can do that, we will do a much better job of hitting the spot that is needed from our customers.
I love that. I think it always comes down to why. I love that, Michelle. If I was going to add anything to what Alex and Michelle said, is to be able to deliver excellent customer experience, or even a good customer experience, you need to understand the customers, understand their pain point. Unless you understand them, walk with them, and understand what their environment is, we're just making lip service. The more we understand about their environment and the challenges, the more we're able to do things that deliver optimal customer experience for them. And the customer experience is along the whole journey, from sales rep to medical to the website to the booth. Everything that they interact with us is an opportunity for them to experience us. So we have to make sure all of it is well thought through and is aligned.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Steph, I don't know if you have a closing remark.
Oh, I think everyone got a medal today, so there is no closing remarks for us, right? For me, at least. Thank you very much for being a part of the show. It's definitely our pleasure. Stay tuned to the show.
Yes.
I hope we will see the speakers on this show more often. Thank you guys for coming.
Happy to come back.
Thank you for the invite.
And I guess all of you are going to next farm, right?
Yep.
So, guys, if you're going.
We should have a party there.
Well, I can join virtually, but I can join. Just send me the Google link.
But it was great, all the questions we got from the audience as well. It was really fantastic. We
Absolutely.
thank you guys for staying with us and for the great questions. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Totally. Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, our attendees, and thank you, our speakers. And as Stefan says, stay tuned, and we will see you in the next Pharma Insights.